welcome from my side to the Agile Austria conference in Graz. My name is Christoph Schmiedinger and I'm working for World Consulting. We are a consulting company, let's say, that's specialized on agility, from, let's say, helping and supporting teams, adopting agile methods, till corporate transformations towards a more agile organization. And the topic I want to talk today is the Spotify model. I mean, it's quite a buzzword in recent times. It's kind of a role model for reorganizing, let's say, organizations from a, let's say, structural point of view. And first of all, I want to do a little check. How many of you know at least a little bit about the Spotify model? Okay, so almost all of you. Yeah? That's good, because I would spend only one slide in explaining the model itself, because otherwise it would be very boring. Everyone knows the white paper and you can read, of course, all this stuff. But I want today look more, let's say, behind the scenes. What I had a question in mind: what was Spotify actually doing after 2012? Are these models new, or are there other models in the past that have been some kind of adopted in order to fit Spotify? And another part I will explain, or I will elaborate on, is what are, let's say, challenges that corporations or companies face when adopting this model, or when adopting this approach, let's say. I had the opportunity to support 3 clients that were adopting this model from a large corporation which moved, let's say, about 1,000 people in this new structure, and also a quite small one where they just created one single tribe with 50 people. So, enough of telling you what is going to happen. Let's start directly into the topic. And first of all, well, the rise of the Spotify model. I mean, it's as many of you know, it's quite the role model or the blueprint for today's organization to be agile, to be innovative. And let's say one of the main reasons is that the ING banking group adopted this model in 2015. And actually they adopted in the Netherlands. They switched a lot of people, a couple thousands in this new structure, and right now they are rolling it out to their whole, let's say, group, for example, Austria, Belgium, all these other subsidiaries. And from that point in time, it was no longer a model that just fit, let's say, startups. Because in the past, I mean, it was available since 2012, but many people say, okay, it's just because of, I mean, they are a startup, they are a tech company. That's why it's working the most. But from the moment ING adopted the model, it was no longer a model only for startups, because ING is quite traditional, especially in the Netherlands, because they have also branches and all the kind of stuff where typically banks have challenges right now. And from that point on, and I just here 2 examples, and from that point in time, more and more, let's say, large corporates were adopting this kind of structure. And it's just 2 examples I quickly found on the internet. So Commerzbank or Telekom, for example, in Germany, they were also adopting this model. And let's say, to quickly introduce, this is the slide I promised before, to quickly introduce the model. I mean, it was published already in 2012, so 7 years ago, and by Hendrik Nieberg and Anders Ivarsen. And basically, Spotify divided its corporate structure into tribes, and tribes are responsible for, let's say, end-to-end development of one product or one part of the product. For example, for Spotify, one of the tribes was the music player, the other one was the playlist. And these tribes are headed by a tribe lead, and he or she is responsible for the heading and the direction of the tribe. Within this tribe, they have so-called squads. These are, let's say, small single teams, agile teams that are quite autonomous. They have product owners that are responsible for, let's say, giving the direction, giving the vision for these individual squads. And while this is the one, let's say, X of the matrix organization, they have a second one within the tribe. It's the chapter, and it's quite let's say, the big mystery of this model. I will elaborate on this a little bit later, because there are a lot of questions there. The chapter is, let's say, combining people or employees that have, let's say, a same skill set, same expertise within the tribe. For example, all the database developers combined to a chapter for the database developers, and there's one chapter lead who is also working in one of the squads. And they have also a third element, it's the guilds, and in contrast to the chapter, it's more voluntary. So it's more let's say, a knowledge-sharing community stuff, where they have guilds among or across tribes where they, let's say, get together in order to talk about a common interest. Yeah, for example, test automatization or whatever people are interested in. It's not that, let's say, strict and formal like the chapter. And what I want to do now is to, let's say, to look a little bit back on 2012 to see what's the scene where this, let's say, this model was invented. It was 2012, it's in Stockholm, and Spotify at that time had about 600 people. 600 employees, mainly tech-oriented, and let's say the employee base, it was very young. So many people were very young. Even the founder and CEO, Daniel Ek, was at that time only 29 years old. And they had a strong focus on growth. Yeah? They were growing, let's say, like hell, because they already knew in 2012 that they only have a chance against the large tech corporates like Amazon, Google, Apple. They only have a chance if they have a large customer base. So they were putting money in order to grow. And actually, they have been right. I mean, it wouldn't be possible that Spotify is still alive if they had just a few hundred thousands of users. They simply wouldn't have enough cash to compete with Apple and all the kind of companies. And that's why they had a strong focus on growth. And the third thing that they also mentioned in the white paper is that they still have a metrics. It's still a metrics organization, but they shifted it per 90 degrees. So they shifted it 90 degrees, and they call it, it's a weighted towards delivery metrics, because in the foreground it's not the functional perspective anymore. It's rather let's say the value stream in the foreground. So the squads are, let's say, the foreground. In the background, it's rather the chapters where you do all this kind of alignment stuff, that people have the right skills and all that. And another interesting example is they also integrated a disclaimer. So it basically says, we didn't invent this model, please don't copy it. Yeah? And by the time you read it, we probably already have another organization. Yeah? And that's probably also what I criticize nowadays, that many corporations, also the large ones, they are somehow too quickly in adopting these new structures. Yeah? They don't think that much about, does this structure fit to my company? Does it fit to my culture? Does it fit to my business model? Because many corporates right now are, let's say, putting or have a lot of pressure towards these digitalization challenges and all that kind of stuff. So they simply adopt it too quickly and somehow misinterpret some of the factors, and then they implement it probably wrong, and then it's really a pitfall. I mean, it's a reorganization. It's not that you do that every day. Yeah? I mean, it's good to say fast, fail fast, yeah? But in case of a reorganization, it might be quite painful, yeah? In order to fail several times. So actually, what's interesting, by the time you read this, things have already changed, and we have now 2009. So for sure, things will have changed in these years. And what I want to first elaborate on is what happened after 2012. Yeah? And it's quite interesting. Actually, they grew up to 4,000 people right now, and at the time of 2015, they already incorporated some of the learnings they had with the structure of 2012 and incorporated the learnings and adapted it a little bit in 2015. And in 2015, they had, just to give you a figure, they had about 2,000 employees. So I always wondered why people are not looking for what happened after 2012. And when I talk with a lot of people that are, let's say, investigating in adopting this model to their organization, they simply don't know what happened after 2012. And my hypothesis is that, I mean, the 2012 white paper, it's easy to find. Yeah? You Google it, it's 10 seconds. Yeah? And let's say the stuff, what they did afterwards is probably more tricky to find, but it only takes 1 to 2 hours. So you can really do the research. It's not like sitting in study books or something. So actually I want to mention 2 things they changed. And it's interesting because these changes are mapped to, let's say, the challenges also corporations have today in adopting this structured approach. The first one is the tribe leadership. So they implemented, in case of one tribe lead, they figured out that typically a tribe lead is a little bit one-sided. Yeah? Either it comes from tech or either it comes from business. In the Spotify case, they very often came from tech side, and they had lack of business knowledge. Yeah? And so they were really challenged in, let's say, in leading the tribe, and it was tough and all that kind of stuff. So they implemented in 2015 some kind of light or tribe leadership trio. So it's a leadership team actually, and they had one tech lead who is mainly responsible for all the tech and let's say IT stuff in that tribe. They have a product lead, which is probably the tribe lead from a business perspective. He was in charge, or he or she was in charge for, or is in charge of the business mission and the return on invest. And they have a design lead. A design lead that is mainly, let's say, responsible for that all the squads within the tribe have using the same guidelines regarding UX and all that kind of stuff. And the second thing they introduced this was what they called alliances. So when they were growing from 600 to 2,000 people, more and more tribes were generated. And suddenly they had, I think in one paper was mentioned, they had about 30 or even 40 tribes. And they missed somehow a vertical alignment between the tribes, because everyone was operating on itself, and it's like creating new silos. And what they have done is they created alliances, and these alliances have so-called missions. They are either business missions or support missions, depending on the customer. So the internal customer are the support missions, and the external customers are the business missions. And for example, they had, just to give you an example, for the alliance, they had one for the music listener and one for the labels. So they grouped, let's say, an alliance for a customer segment, and then put all tribes together that are, let's say, delivering value for that specific customer segment. If you take an example of a bank, it might be easier. For example, if you have retail customers and retail customers want to do daily banking, for example, all the payment stuff, they want to have loans and probably they want to invest money. Yeah? So you put the 3 tribes, investment, daily banking, and loans together in one alliance for retail customers in order to ensure the proper alignment that, let's say, that the products look or the services look the same for the end consumer. So actually they did these 2 major things, and probably also another nice hint is just to emphasize on how much they focused on growth. Yeah? Spotify has earned its first operating profit in the last quarter of 2018. Yeah? So they really burned venture capital cash for 12 years, yeah? Because they were founded in 2006. Yeah? So probably if you are trying to adopt this model, just keep in mind it could be a different culture there, yeah? Because they were really focusing on growth and all kind of stuff. Yeah? Question right now? Yeah?
Yes. May I ask the difference between alliance and for scaling, for example, for the latest project? How would you understand the difference between alliance in the meaning and the value stream, for example, is less or scalable?
I mean, I know what you're trying to get for, let's say, probably there are some similarities. I'm probably today more looking from an operational point of view or from an organizational structure point of view, or really the permanent structure. I mean, for example, less and safety also talk a little bit about permanent structure, but a lot of the stuff is also some kind of temporary in terms of they're using for projects and all that kind of stuff. Yeah? But the important thing is that you collect tribes together in order to address really customer value. Yeah, from that point of view, it might be the same. Yeah? But I don't say that they invented something new. It's just to give you an insight on, let's say, they did some changes, and I'm just curious about why nobody knows about these changes. Because we are today, right now, a lot of adopting Agile, or a lot of adopting the Spotify framework on, let's say, the old setup. They just implement tribes, they just implement tribe leads, and it's targets. And another question I had when doing, or when diving a little bit deeper in the research is the question: is it really new stuff, or is it like old wine in new skin? And of course, it's not that new actually. I figured out that we have, or that not we have, but that there are two approaches actually from the 90s that already address some of these issues that the Spotify model was targeting. The very first one is, let's say, the business unit design pattern. It's typically used in large industry conglomerates, like Siemens, like Thales, and what they do is, in order to decentralize decision making, in order to get more autonomy to the different parts of the organization, typically business units are created. And this is an example, just an example I draw, where we have probably the power utility business of an industry conglomerate, where you have one business unit for the solar industry, for the hydro, for wind, and for nuclear. So what they actually do is grouping it into business units, and then move all the people that are necessary for developing, for marketing, and for selling these products into one unit. So it's all grouped together, let's say, under one formal head, and it's typically the business unit manager who is also responsible, typically profit loss accountability. So this, let's say, business unit manager often has a lot of responsibility, but do also have a lot of autonomy. And while this looks quite cross-functional in terms of business units, the problem is with this design pattern is that typically within the business unit they started to doing a functional segmentation. So when you look at industry conglomerates, here it looks quite cross-functional, but within the business unit you have a department for sales, you have a department for R&D, you have a department for quality assurance. And again, it's the same issue, you're creating some kind of mini silos. Now, although you have grouped here all skills together to, let's say, follow one common goal of common goal that, let's say, the business unit manager gives out to his or her employees. And another thing that I would highlight is the business process engineering approach. It's also from the 90s, and I mean they look at this point from the perspective of, let's say, to highlight the operational structure, so that the processes. And it's again a little bit like also the frameworks mentioned here. The processes are more important because the processes are those that generate value. Typically, people spend more time doing the process than in the functional unit. For example, if you have an agile setup, typically team members, they spend probably 80 to 90% if it's a good setup in their squads, and probably only 10 to 20% for their chapters. So they highlight also this issue of having the permanent organization more tailored to the processes. And what Michael Hammer, and this book is from 1997, what he proposed for the permanent organization is that you create some kind of center of excellences, where you have pools where people are grouped together that have the same skill set. And you have coaches here that are responsible for the professional development of these employees. It's quite interesting that already in 1997 we were talking about the different leadership style. It's not the manager, the resource manager that selects people and divides it to different projects. No, it's a coach here that is responsible here for the professional development of these people that are in these expertise pools. And this is the permanent organization, and then these people are distributed to the different processes. And I used here an insurance example, where you have car, where you have life, where you have household. And here they deliver value to the customer, and there is one process owner that is in charge for end-to-end delivery of KPIs, customer satisfaction, for this specific process. And the interesting thing is that it's quite similar to the Spotify approach, apart from the terminology. For example, the center of excellence could be the chapter. The coaches could be the chapter leads. The business processes here are the squads, and the process owner are basically the product owner. So the approach is already very similar. So it's not that new, and therefore, or with this part, I will also close let's say, the story about what happened in the past, and we are now moving more to what kind of issues are nowadays, let's say, or what kind of issues corporates nowadays face when they adopting this organizational structure. And they face a lot, let's say, but I try to highlight on 4 of them today for the rest of the talk. The first one is the organizational cross-section of tribes. So the question is, what kind of people, what kind of skills do I incorporate to one tribe? And another question I will face in this first segment is, what is the optimum size? I'm very often see that tribes getting too large. The second thing is the role of the product owners, which in this model they really get an appreciation. So product owners are more important, but this is also some kind of overwhelming a lot of people that fulfill these roles in the companies. And let's say the mystery of the chapter and its leads. There are several questions we will tackle in this third topic. And I mean, the Spotify model talks a lot about the delivery units, the product development units, the service development units. But what about support units? What about HR? What about legal and all those other departments that are definitely necessary in order to compete? So let's start with the first one. And I mean, let's say one of the core ideas of this Spotify approach is to get business and IT people under one reporting line. In order to put them together under one single head, under one reporting line, under one common goal, that it's not the issue like before that you have different goals, like the one is IT is going to the left direction, the other to the right direction. So it's really a point of setting a common goal. And although this is probably the most appealing part of this organizational structure, companies often struggle to adopt it that way, because it's difficult. I'm not sure if you can do that, but I really have to emphasize, if you don't do that, you miss a lot of the Spotify model. I mean, it's basically as I said, it's one of the core ideas to merging IT and business people into one single reporting line. And as I said before already, Spotify recognized, and we recognized that too with our clients, that a lot of the tribe leads, and nowadays they are coming traditionally from the business side, a lot of the tribe leads are struggling with their new role, because suddenly they don't have only business experts and subject matter experts, but now they have also some kind of technology guys. Within their department, they have to lead. They have to give instructions on what to do, all that kind of stuff. So the tribe leads are quite overwhelmed, and that's definitely an issue we see very commonly. And I will give, let's say, a possible solution immediately. And the second issue corporates face or companies face that are adopting this kind of model is that tribes are often getting too large. I've seen tribes that are getting to 200 or even 300 people. And normally in literature it says organizational structures should be limited by this Dunbar number. And this Dunbar number is basically the amount of people that are able to know each other quite well, to link to each other, to give a bonding between the people, and it's typically referred to be 120 to 140 people. And Spotify limits in the white paper the tribe to 100, so even less. But when you look at it from a management span or from direct report point of view, it's still quite large. This is an example from one of my clients. He had a tribe with 100 employees, and if you divide the 100 employees in small autonomous squads, you typically be around 12 to 16 squads. And if each of the squads has a product owner, then you have 12 to 16 product owners as well. And when you do some further calculation, you have probably 3 business experts per squad, and for all these business experts, for about 30 to 40 business experts, you of course need also chapters and chapter leads. And probably you have 4 to 7 business chapters with chapter leads. And imagine that only the product owners and only the business chapter leads are reporting to the tribe leads. The tribe lead management span, the direct reports are getting close to 20. And although you're probably not a fan of strict hierarchies, it's basically too much. I mean, also modern HR leadership is about having time for your employees, do some kind of one-to-one coaching, and all that kind of stuff isn't possible if you have 20 direct reports. So please bear in mind from, let's say, from this point of view, this setup is not that easy, or it's at least not maintainable in a sustainable pace or future, because the direct reports are way too much for the tribe. And of course, one possible solution for let's say, for both issues that I already addressed is that already Spotify did. You can, of course, extend, let's say, the leadership from tribe leadership to a duo, to a trio. And basically, I often compare it with kind of the management board for the tribe. You have probably the CEO, which comes from the business side. Probably he or she is really the most important, because someone has to take the last decision if there are some conflicts in prioritizing. Then you have the CTO that is in charge for all the technical, all the IT-related stuff. And here, I mean, the chief experience officer, I mean, you have to think about if you need it. I mean, if you look at Spotify, they are really, one of their brand, or one of the characteristics of their brand is definitely the design. When you see the app, when you see the page, you have to question yourself if you really need this or not. And this, of course, is quite good in order to share responsibilities. I think the overwhelming of the tribe lead is far less with this concept, and actually with one of our clients we implemented an IT lead for every tribe. And it was quite good to do that, because the client has quite large tribes. They were all above 70, some of them even 120, 130 people, and it's good to have, let's say, a person that is responsible for IT in such a big environment, especially if, I mean, everything is digital today. And the second thing is regarding the time, or regarding the management span, regarding the amount of direct reports to the tribe leads. It could be an improvement, but it won't be that much. So you have to do some further, let's say, improvements in order to reduce the direct reports even more. And I will come quickly to that in the second point. And this leads me also to the second point, to the role of the product owner. As already outlined, the product owner really gets an appreciation in this model. I mean, it's the ING calls it delayering. It's delayering from whatever amount of layers you have in the organization, basically to 3. It's the product owner, it's the tribe lead, and typically above the tribe lead there is the board. And I mean, in terms of alliances, they added one more, so it's 4 layers. And the issue is that, let's say, imagine a tribe with probably 12 squads, and they develop, I don't know, 4 to 5 products. And of course, everyone can understand the tribe lead won't do the strategy for all those 4 or 5 products. So the product owners really have to do all the strategic work that probably have done in the past some kind of middle management. I mean, it's not that bad. I mean, it's that what HR looks for. So for product owners that are confident, that are responsible, that do the strategic work, but nevertheless, we see in the organizations that they are overwhelmed by this, let's say, amount of responsibility. And to just give you the hint, you have to ensure how to educate them, how you can provide them the guidance they need in order to do all this kind of strategic work. So just bear in mind, because there is a large gap between product owner and tribe lead, someone has to fill this gap, and it won't be the tribe lead, because he or she won't have the time. And another difficulty in that is, and probably this is a difficulty for later, it's more difficult to advance on the career level, because there is such a large gap. I mean, if you're a good product owner and you are good at managing 9 people, can we say that you are also good in managing a tribe? I mean, it's very often 100 people. It's one below board. Yeah? The world is different. Yeah? We had that one client where the client moved almost 1,000 people. We had several nominations, more than positions for product owners, but we really had troubles to recruit the tribe leads. Yeah? Because this is a segment where, let's say, it's difficult to find people they also want to get there, yeah? Because there is definitely another pressure and all kind of stuff. Yeah?
I got a question because what we're talking now is people responsibility, but has the tribe lead also subject responsibility, like about the product, what decisions the product owners should make, or would this be separate?
Yeah, typically, I mean, in a broad term, yes. Yeah. Imagine the example that it's, for example, in the bank, that might be the investment tribe. Yeah. Then he or she is responsible for setting the vision. Where do we want with investments? Yeah. Do we grow? Do we not grow? Do we want retail customers? Do we want corporates or whatever? And he or she sets somehow the alignment for the product owners. Yeah? The product owners might develop the applications. Yeah? For example, one of them is developing a robo-advisor. Yeah? The other one is developing, let's say, the normal banking application where you can buy or sell securities. Yeah? So that the tribe lead is, of course, responsible for the people, but also very responsible for setting the vision and doing the alignment in the business terms. So it's quite a challenging job, and he's responsible for that below the board. Yeah? So typically there is a chief retail officer or whatever in the bank above the tribe lead. And so it's more difficult to advance on the career ladder because you miss middle management. Yeah? You miss this second step after being a good team leader, getting a division lead or whatever, getting a group lead. Just to bear in mind, it's not that bad, but bear in mind that it's difficult in order to, let's say, do some, you have to do something with HR in order to do a proper career there. And basically, let's say I figured out two possible solutions where you can deal with that. I mean, you can work even more in that direction. You can, and this helps also minimizing the direct reports that are reporting to the tribe lead. You can use one product owner for several teams. I mean, this makes sense typically in large environments where they're working on one product. Yeah? For example, 2 or 3 teams are working on the robo-advisor, then it makes sense that we have one product owner. But this, of course, needs very, let's say, independent teams. Yeah? You have to have teams that are writing user stories by themselves, that are doing the coordination with all the stakeholders, with all the end users and all that kind of stuff. So it could be a good approach. I mean, it's what we also refer as a proper mature agile setup. And I think the Spotify model helps with such approach because as you are combining IT and business together, you already have business experts in your tribe, you already have business experts in your squad, so it might be easier to do let's say some part of the product owner work here in these teams. Another possibility is that you introduce, of course, some kind of chief product owner role. A lot of people comment here that it's not that good. I mean, you're introducing a new layer and all that kind of stuff, but I believe actually it's a matter of mindset. Yeah? I mean, chief product owner typically are no disciplinary leaders. Yeah? They should be lateral leaders. It could help the product owners here to really focus on their specific topic. Yeah? For example, we have been advising a bank that has a chief product owner for the online banking application. And there was one team responsible for daily banking, for all the payments, for all, let's say, the normal cash business. We had one team for more investments, for buying and selling securities and all that kind of stuff. And we had one team for cross-selling and getting in contact with the consultant. So these are two possibilities, and of course with these two possibilities, in both cases you limit enormously the amount of direct reports to the tribe leads, because you have here less product owners, you have here chief product owners. So imagine, let's say that the direct report size would be around 10 to 12. Yeah, I mean it depends on the setup of the organizational units, but it's way better than before the 20, because as a tribe leads, I think you can manage a direct report line of approximately 10 to 12 people. So the third aspect is the chapter lead, and there are a lot of questions regarding the chapter lead. I call it sometimes it's the mystery of the model, because there are a lot of questions. What does actually a chapter do? Yeah? How are they involved in daily business? How strict are their standards or alignment? Yeah? Is the chapter lead a disciplinary leader? Does the chapter lead work in the team, yeah? or does he or she not working operative in the team? Yeah? If it is the disciplinary leader, what happens if the chapter lead is in the same team as one of each chapter team members? Yeah? Do we still have a kind of hierarchy-free room for collaboration or not? Yeah? And I want to first elaborate on the theory. On the theory, it's quite simple because Spotify says chapter lead is the disciplinary leader, yeah? And all the duties of a disciplinary leader is assigned to the chapter lead. So. Setting expectation management, setting salaries, giving feedback, all that kind of stuff is directly linked to the chapter lead. And Spotify is also very clear on if the chapter lead has to work within a squad, and they say yes. He or she has to work in a squad because otherwise there might be the risk that they lose contact with reality. So they try to avoid some kind of ivory tower management.
What is the difference then to fellowship? Like in different companies where it's like fellowship and it's like disciplinary, as well, not the management, but at least like the knowledge, there's no knowledge, the leadership of the knowledge.
Yeah, I'm not sure if it's really, let's say, well defined fellow, yeah, but fellow typically is also a very kind of experienced person that is responsible for other colleagues to develop them professionally further. And is it typically responsible disciplinary or lateral?
No,
Yeah, then it's probably a simple, let's say, concept. Yeah. And yeah, because he's or the chapter lead is responsible for professional development, as already said, and he's responsible disciplinary. And but what you have to bear in mind is that we are talking about Spotify, we are talking about the startup. Back in 2012, we are talking about Scandinavian startup, that to be more specifically. Yeah? And I just, it's also a kind of Google result, I just Googled some kind of facts about Scandinavian leadership. And what definitely we have to acknowledge is that in startups and in Scandinavia, they don't tend too much, or they don't tend to give too much issue on disciplinary leadership. Yeah? They are more relaxed on the topic, let's say. It's definitely different than, let's say, in Middle Europe, where we typically are very strong at, we want to have disciplinary leader in that way, and he has to he can give not only advice, but he can give you also this way that you have to do. And this was the theory, and in reality, we often see that there's some kind of habit that you just move the team leader to the chapter leader. And just like, I call it same but different. I mean, it's a different, let's say, name for the role, but the tasks and the duties are all the same. And actually, this doesn't make sense. The spot to adopt the model and just performing some kind of transformation from the team leaders to the chapter leads, it doesn't make sense that much. And what I propose, and actually we tried with one customer, but we failed also at the board because it's quite challenging to implement that. I propose the logical, let's say the logical progression would be to follow, let's say it's the model of Daniel Pink. Daniel Pink basically says people can thrive in a proper environment if they have autonomy, purpose, and mastery. If you're putting it all together, then people can perform and thrive in the company. And typically in agile models, roles are assigned to these different duties or responsibilities. So the Scrum Master or agile coach is responsible for autonomy, the product owner is responsible for purpose, and the chapter lead is responsible for mastery. And while the Scrum Master and the product owner are lateral leadership roles, the chapter lead is most of the time disciplinary. And the logical progression would be, why not also, let's say, putting the chapter lead also in the lateral leadership position. That all of them leading the team in the lateral way, and they share, let's say, all the day-to-day management duties by this tree. And what is necessary for such let's say, for such a setup, and that is also what it makes it so difficult. Yeah? You have to take care of that not the chapter lead sets the salary. I mean, it doesn't make sense that you're a lateral leader and then you're setting my salary. It won't. That's not working actually. So you have to do implementing some kind of true and major 360-degree processes. You have to do some collective salary determination processes. So you have to make sure that everything is disconnected from one of these three roles. And as this is quite a sensitive topic, typically, let's say, corporates or companies are hesitant to do that. And actually, we advised one of our clients to do so. We, HR and all the people were fine, but at the board we failed. They said, no, that's probably too tricky to change, and we cannot do this right now. And I mean, it's a bold step. We definitely have to agree. And regarding the last thing, if the chapter lead should be working operative in a squad or not, we typically advise it depends on how much alignment needs are within the chapter. If the alignment needs are very small, let's say you work for a chapter where the alignment needs and the standard setting needs are, let's say, below 20% of your work time, you can work in a squad. Because you have time to support them, you have time to do also some kind of work for the user stories, but you have to bear in mind that you violate one of the principles of Scrum, for example, that you have focus, because you have two different focus. You work in a team and you are in charge of, let's say, to do a little bit of alignment and to also, let's say, develop your colleagues further. So it's tricky, and that's why we say if you have more responsibilities towards alignment, towards strategy setting, you shouldn't be or you should not work within a squad. But you have to be aware that you, let's say, that you really take care that you're not creating any ivory tower management. So we do advise if you have too much duties, it doesn't make sense to work in a Scrum team. I mean, you can imagine if you have more than 50% of your time other duties, it doesn't make sense to be a part of a Scrum team. So it's really a tough situation to make sure that they are close to reality and don't do something that is not in touch with reality, that the people there really fix. Just an example where we typically have an UX design chapter is typically there is a lot of responsibilities in alignment. You have to have a style guide, you have to develop them, you have to maintain them, you have to make decisions about what is the customer perception of our brand. And of course you have to do the continuous development of the team members. So if you have all those duties, I'm not sure if you have time to really closely collaborate also in the squad. That probably won't happen. So these are, let's say, at least some of the ideas you could deal with the chapter. And the very last thing I would like to talk about is the support units. I mean, Spotify is really talking a lot about the product development units, how to organize delivery, but what to do with all the support units, what to do with legal, with HR, with management accounting. And we do think that ultimately the whole company somehow has to be agile in order to scale an agile organization. But we emphasize that this doesn't mean that everyone has to do Scrum or some other particular method. It's more important that, let's say, people are aware of the agile values and principles and that they adhere to these values and principles. So this is far more, let's say, this is far more important. And of course they can do some, or they can use some of the things that are typically connected to agile methods, like introducing a task board for, let's say, making work transparent, make it visual. They can do stand-ups in order to get to know what the others are working on. They can do some pair programming or pair working or more programming, more working, whatever. And there are several, let's say, there are several other possibilities in order to how organize them. Just to give you a little bit of hint, the ING, for example, is the support units are organized more like center of expertise. and they also use holacracy for some of their sales stuff, for some of their service units. So there are, let's say, other ideas how to organize all the departments, all the functions that are probably not within the delivery setup where you have the tribes and all that kind of stuff. And let's say at the very end, as a small warning that I think I already talked at the very beginning about it. It's a reorganization or a change of the organizational structure. It's always a huge impact to the organization. So you do better take time to invest in what you are doing. And probably that's the main criticism also on adopting the Spotify model. I mean, you're typically, even if you are arranging only a small part of your company, typically more than 50 people are involved. Sometimes even hundreds. For example, the Commerzbank is now moving 9,000 people, I think, in the new Spotify structure, or some kind of Spotify structure. So it's really huge. And therefore, we advise to take a look deeper into the models, to let's say, think, what is our goal? What kind of operating model do we need to achieve this goal? What kind of organizational structure fits to our operating model? And if we have, let's say, on our short list a few operational models, a few organizational models, then let's get in contact with other companies that already have or already have adopted to some of its models. And I mean, we are in 2019, a lot of companies already have made the step to do such an endeavor. And you can, let's say, participate or profit by the learnings they also most often they share. And what we also advise is to do, let's say, a structured change approach. It's just our approach. I mean, there are dozens of approaches for transition teams, for transformation teams, for change teams, whatever. Just bear in mind that you have some kind of structured process that is doing the whole change. To do it iteratively, have a team that, let's say, also works agile in delivering the new organization, because it makes sense to be some kind of role model. It does not make sense to introduce a new organizational structure and then you roll it out like a big bang project, where you plan a lot and then just roll it out. So it's better to do it in iterations, to get early feedback, to get everyone involved, in order to also lessen the uncertainty, because typically we also, it's also part of the reorganization. Typically you have a dip in productivity before the reorganization and after the reorganization. So you really have to think about what I'm willing to invest in such a transition, because all the teams are getting together, and before the reorganization everyone is looking for in which role I can get. It's like people are searching for the new harbor where they will be in the future. And to conclude, we talked today about, or I talked a little bit about what is the Spotify model, where does it come from, what happened with Spotify after 2012, it's quite interesting, I mean, it's 7 years ago, and also about these 4 challenges. So the cross-section of tribes, keep in mind putting IT and business into one single organization with one single responsibility head is very important. Don't get too large tribes. It doesn't make sense to have 200, 300, or even 400 people in one tribe. The role of the product owners, it's really getting toward a mature agile setup. Plus, keep in mind that you have to, let's say, do some or provide the product owners some help to get there. Chapter leads and chapters, it's quite difficult. You have to decide on are they disciplinary or not. There might be a solution for not disciplinary leaders, but this is quite painful, and this means a lot of rethinking, let's say, sensitive topics like salary setting and all kind of stuff. And the very last part here in these chapters was the question, are they working operative in the squad or not? And my suggestion is this is mainly depending on how much standard setting is necessary, how much strategy do you need, and how much time this needs. And the last one is setting the support units, and as I said, provide them with agile values, provide them with agile principles. And the most important thing is that they understand what is agile about. And there are dozens of other, let's say, organizational structure models like holacracy or whatever that can be used there. Again, you have to invest time, you have to dig into the topic in order to, let's say, say, find the optimal setup. Okay, thank you very much. So, questions? Yeah.
Thank you for the great presentation. I have a question regarding the word disciplinary in
Yeah.
English, because it can mean two things.
Okay.
In German it's disziplinarisch,
Yeah.
so regarding performance,
Yeah.
salary, low performance also,
Yeah.
but it also means fachlich in
Okay.
German. So regarding discipline, for example, customer experience, how do we do it, governance and so on. If you look at Scrum, those two things are always separated. There's the Scrum Master doing the performance and the product owner doing the content, the fachliche. Why is it together with the chapter lead?
First of all, thanks. I think it's probably really not a proper translation. Yeah, of course, I meant the more disciplinary stuff of setting salaries and all kind of stuff. Yeah, typically it is divided. Yeah, I mean, I think also the approach of Daniel Pink, it wasn't used to be. He just meant that you need these three things. Yeah, and somehow they said, okay, we need one discipline leader. I think it's probably the most easiest way because it's like it's that close to our current situation. Huh? So you have these new three roles and you think about where to put the disciplinary leadership in terms of salary setting, performance evaluation, and it's just like Scrum Master, oh, that feels odd, yeah? Of course. Yeah? But product owner, chapter lead, yes, chapter lead, because it was in the past, and the chapter lead could be some kind of team leader, yeah, for database developers. My assumption is it's the most easiest solution, yeah, in terms of not getting into troubles with the whole organization. But actually it doesn't make that much sense.
And why can that be the metrics team or something?
The metrics team?
Yes, which is measuring, for example, in general for the company at this scale.
I'm not sure what you mean with metrics team.
Like, if you're measuring the performance and so on, but those are disciplinary stuff,
Yeah.
why you're not giving that for the general responsibility, like for the team which is measuring the performance of the company or something on the different.
Yeah, I mean, if you measure it on company level, I think that the problem is how you can rate people on the company level. Yeah? I mean, typically you are, let's say, typically you don't feel familiar or you don't feel comfortable when someone way beyond your sphere is rating. Typically it should be people that are close to you. So that's why I also proposed the solution of a 360-degree feedback or something like that. So that people that are closely working together with you are basically rating your performance. I mean, it definitely makes sense, and I think if people get, let's say, some kind of negative feedback or let's say they will accept it way more if it comes from direct colleagues than just from let's say a board that is rating all the employees in the company.
Isn't that interfering with Scrum? Because normally you want to have goals and if you measure performance intention, you might not want to.
Yeah, I do agree, but to be honest, then you can say, do we have team salaries and all that kind of stuff? Yeah? So the discussion can be continued, yeah? But let's say right now we are kind of individual salaries. Yeah? At least I don't know any company that has team salaries yet. Yeah? But then it makes sense, of course, to use evaluation. And I think it's probably the most not interfering with Scrum and Agile if it's done by a team. Actually, if you have, it's rated by product owner, Scrum Master, team colleagues, probably even customers and chapter leader. So these people are having, let's say 360 degree of view what you are performing or not, yeah? Or at least how many skills you have. Yeah? I mean, salary is not only performance; it's also how skilled you are, at which level. Yeah? If you're a junior developer or a senior developer, you have 5 years or 10 years. And typically this is done also with salary bands, kind of salary steps where you progress the ladder. So it's not like anybody is doing some kind of I take 20 and 50. It's some kind of you rate people in the advantage.
decision to hire and to fire you should not be should not be at the discretion of the chapter lead. I understand, but at whose discretion should it be?
Yeah.
Is it a team decision to hire and fire somebody?
I mean, I think that the more easy part is probably the hiring. Yeah?
Yeah.
That's definitely that could be easier team decision. Yeah? That could be easier team decision. I mean, in the proposal where we did this with our client, we proposed that let's say for escalation management, the tribe lead is ultimately responsible for firing. Yeah? But of course, he won't do it by himself or herself. Yeah? He or she has to get the feedback, because if you're managing 100 people, you might not know if one performs good or not. But in that concept, we advise that, let's say, the escalation stuff is done, let's say the disciplinary leader in terms of this stuff is the tribe lead, but of course he has to get feedback. Yeah? And what is interesting is probably inside of IAG, they have the so-called potluck meetings, where PO meets with chapter leads and scrum masters. And this is some kind of informal leadership trio at the lowest level, at the squad level. And typically, or you can assign to them such decisions. If the three are, let's say, agree on that someone has to be removed from a team, then it should be followed. Are there any questions? Sorry.
One aspect to think about for chapter leads would be to part between evaluating an employee and giving subject matter growth to an employee. So if you're a chapter lead, to as you said, rate the employee isn't that feasible, because maybe he's in a totally other squad and you have to rely on feedback from other persons which might be tinted or something. So you can't really evaluate it, but what you can do is see on a subject, professional level, where skills or where something might be needed, or in which direction in the subject he would want to move, and then support him in doing so.
Yeah. And I think it's like a puzzle, yeah. For example, from the chapter lead, you get this insight, yeah, where he stands on, let's say, on the skill
yes.
set, yeah. And probably from the Scrum Master, product owner, becomes more how he performs, how he tries to go the last mile, yeah. And from the team members, from the colleagues, from the teams, they probably rate more the aspect of it's easy to work with you together, yeah. Can we pair, can we achieve something together? And so it's like this 360-degree
yeah.
view, and I think if you have feedback from 10 people, it can't be tainted that much. Yeah?
Not only this, but maybe also from other squads or something, get some feedback if you work together to see if there is room for improvement also.
Definitely. Probably two more questions because we have them to finish. Yeah, you.
I'd like to ask something regarding this alliance versus a tribe leadership. In the examples you have seen, is the alliance really a formal hierarchy, meaning that some decisions are taken by them and have to be escalated? And is it different set of people, or some of the tribe leads have dual hats and they act in both?
And to be honest, I don't know that much companies that have alliances in place, and that's also probably some of the issue because nobody knows that alliances are there. At Spotify, these are different people. Different people that are more senior, even more, and they are, let's say, for the broad vision, yeah? for what are we doing with our labels, yeah? For example, at Spotify, what are we doing with our listeners, yeah? In which direction do we head? Then you have tribes for the music player, for the playlist, yeah? And decisions there, of course, influence, like always, the different tribe visions, and this influence the different squads, yeah? It's like top-down. So, there was one at the back over. No? Here, yeah.
Just about, is there something like a safety net for overly not concentrating on performance while peer reviewing and more on personal sympathy? Because people are people and we tend to be not very nice.
Or too nice.
I mean, to be honest, I'm not an expert in 360-degree feedbacks, but I'm pretty sure if you have, let's say, a set that is large enough, yeah, and that's kind of independent, it might be difficult that if everyone or if everybody's not liking the one, yeah, it could be hard. Yeah, true, it could be hard, but actually, let's say the chances are even better there. For example, nowadays you have just one single person that rates it. Now, what if he doesn't like it, or she doesn't? I mean, it's even more risky right now. Yeah? So I'm not sure if that's sorry for that. Okay, thank you very much for joining the session.